So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have my guests today, Julie and Samuel. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thanks so much for having us. Excited to be here, Guy. We've chatted before. I'm glad we can do that, in a postable sense.
Yeah. Julie, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
All right. So Julie is a passionate learner and teacher focusing on empowering clients with deeper understanding to live a vibrant and fulfilling life with meaningful interpersonal relationships. As an adoptive parent who's familiar with adoption trauma, grief, and loss, Julie is able to empathically come alongside adoptive families and adoptees with steadfast support and compassionate care. Her heart was moved for adoption in 2004, and she's been leading mission teams to China to serve in orphan care ever since. Her son, Samuel, is co-host of the podcast, an advocate for mental health, and the IT brains behind the podcast, Samuel?
Yeah.
Can you say that?
Yeah, I do all the editing and stuff like that. And so all the pain that went with, years of doing that. But yeah, I think that sums it up pretty good. I'm realizing maybe I should have sent a better intro than what we had. But I'm flattered. Thanks, Guy. Yes, that sums it up pretty well.
You're welcome. All right, so let's jump in here. How did this all start for you? How did the podcast start for you? We're going to be talking about the podcast, and maybe even let's take a step beyond that and go back a little further. Start with you, Julie. How did this interest start for you? This passion start for you?
Definitely a passion for mental health came out of a lot of well-meaning household that I was raised in, but didn't really have any context for mental health, healthy relationships, anything like that. And so I have been on a journey for decades for my own healing and growth. And that process changed my life, changed my parenting. I was talking to our daughter is getting married in 2 weeks, and she was telling me that she remembers the first half of her childhood, and she remembers like when things changed and we became almost a different family because so much emphasis was put on mental health and relationships. And so I think pursuing that with all my heart from the standpoint of how do we heal, how do we grow, how do we be just healthy humans, and really that passion spills out into all of my different relationships as just a wife, a mom, a friend, a therapist. Just is life. It's a life-giving, lifelong process for me. And so as far as where that kind of joined the road with the podcast, Samuel and I have Samuel's firstborn, and we have often had really deep conversations that have been really close, connected, meaningful. And I remember the day that we were in the kitchen and he was asking me, Mom, how do you change the world? And I said, I think you get healthy and you have healthy relationships and healthy workplaces. And from that place, you're going to be a world changer. And he said, great, let's do a podcast. So is that how you remember it too, Samuel? Or is there any part of that story you would add?
I would say my memory is a little different when I think I was at work at the time. And I mean, at the time I was still figuring out my career. And so I was able to have headphones on at work. And we were just talking for like hours, and we were like, we should just record this. And so, at the time we ended up hooking up together with the local radio station that was here. We just put 2 microphones and started recording it. And I'll admit, I was trying to get Mom to start her own business at that point. So it was a double win-win.
Yeah, I was not yet in private practice. Yeah, I was not yet in private practice. And so Samuel has always been a great encouragement to me, and just, Mom, I think you could go out and do private practice and we can find you an office and all this kind of stuff. He's really been a big encourager and influence for me. And I think the podcast also kind of was a good context for that, of like, okay, we could reach people in this way and offer. I know one of our passions is that it is offering something that is accessible to people. It's free. Obviously, there's some level of privilege that people have internet connection, or they have a phone, and that there is that dynamic to it, but it's also easily accessible and widespread, and people and listeners in different countries, and getting connected in that way. So it's been a great reach, to be able to be an encouragement to other people.
I want to kind of get more in depth into the podcast, but before we do, where are you guys located?
We're in Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. Okay. So, Julie, you said, when you were talking about your daughter, she said, or you said, she said that she could identify like the early part and then the latter part of her life, and when things shifted. And you said it was when you started focusing on mental health in the family. Say more about that.
I was raised in a family that was conservative Christian, and have a faith that started in my childhood, and that's always been important to me. But the only coping skill that I had was to do a Bible study. And so I did that for my teens and 20s, and about in my mid 30s, I realized there's a whole lot going on that this isn't touching, that I needed to go deeper. I needed to be able to kind of face some really hard realities that our family was going through. And I needed to kind of focus in more on doing some trauma work. And so that was life-changing. I think, I'm still a person of faith, and that's important to me, but I have definitely seen a whole lot of pain in my own story, but also in the people that I am able to accompany in their healing journey. And it just gives me a desire to create safe spaces for people to heal and to grow, and to really be just authentic humans. Like, there's no sense, I can't tolerate the idea of a pedestal, that anybody would say, oh, they're so amazing and perfect and all of that. It's like, that's not realistic, and that's not something that I would ever want. And it's not something that really promotes healing or growth in each other. And so I think if you would ask any of our family members, I am guessing, and Samuel, you get to say whatever you want to about it, but I feel like the 6 of us in particular have been through a lot. Mm-hmm. And we have been, I think, learning as a family how to allow each person to authentically find what they are passionate about and what is important to them, and that we come alongside that and we support that, and we learn, we get stretched outside of our comfort zone. I know I have certainly been challenged in so many ways, but it's been so worthwhile, and it has taken us so much deeper. And I think we're learning together how to have healthy relationships, and how to care for each other, and how to have hard conversations, or hurt together, or heal together. And that's something that I really didn't ever have growing up. I think I always wanted it. I always needed it. And I think it's getting to that place in my life where that priority kept me alive, but then I can pass that down to the next generation, and we can all kind of find our way together, whatever that might look like.
Sorry to cut you off there, Samuel. As you're hearing your mom talk, what's coming up for you? What's your response?
Well, I can remember a lot of that, like, shift. What I would say that is awesome about Mom is she went back to school, in your 40s. I don't remember.
I was 42 year. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think 41, turning 42, but yeah.
And I think it came from a place of, empowerment, of a place of, hey, I was impacted by this field and I want to impact others with this field. And so for me, I mean, I've been able to kind of see, lifelong education in that way. And even, it's been cool recently, like my brother going back to school and stuff like that. So it's something that, we see a couple places. But yeah, our family has been through a lot. I think in a lot of ways we are, trying to live with these new models of dealing with dealing like with emotions, dealing with like a complex family situations. We have a variety of beliefs in our house. We have different ways of eating food. Like with 4 kids, there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so, it's been interesting. It's one of those, I mean, whenever I was in college, this is a wild story. But whenever I was in college, I remember thinking I'm excited to have Friendsgiving and be surrounded by friends whenever I have Thanksgiving dinner. And it actually happened to me 3 years later where I was around all my friends. And, when I was sitting in this moment realizing this is what I wanted, I looked around and I was like, this is so much different than I realized it would be. I mean, it isn't any less. It's just different and deeper than I thought it would be. And in that same way, that's probably our family system where, if you'd say, Samuel, at 28, what would your family look like? It probably wouldn't look like what it is right now, but it is still a really cool, deeper thing that, we've found ways to, grow together and still grow independently and kind of improve on or just kind of change and put our own flair on what living as a Richards may be. And so that's pretty cool.
So you said, you guys were sitting around, you were having these amazing conversations, and you were like, we got to start a podcast. So how did that evolve? How did it practically, literally take off?
So I had been working with a group nearby called the Columbus Free Press, and in their backyard in this carriage house, it's a mansion in downtown Columbus. And in their backyard, they have a carriage house that used to be a place, for horses, but they redid the inside. It's now the headquarters of, a radio station, Free Press area where they publish articles. But anyway, so they have a radio station. So we thought, hey, they've got a recording studio. Let's do it. They said, hey, it sounds like a great idea. Let's just come out. I don't know, Mom, if you have any spaces there to bring. I was going to bring out that we started in the summer of probably 2019, and you weren't able to run the air conditioner at the same time that you were recording because it was too loud.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And so there was one point that we were all recording, and one person was talking and the other people were fanning themselves and like opening the door, open and close just to get some airflow. And we had to stop recording because Mom was laughing too hard. But it kind of started in that way. There was a time that we recorded a couple episodes, and we lost the recording or audio was messed up. And so early kind of struggles of just, well, we're really going to learn about this topic. I guess we were talking about it a couple times. So it kind of had that bumpy start, but we started on the radio, WGRN. And then we also kind of were talking about how do we launch into, the online podcast kind of world. And so we looked at iTunes first, kind of launched the first 5. Actually, our first probably 20 episodes still have the WGRN qualifiers in it. It's straight from the radio, so you'll hear all the stuff. But
let me just jump in here for a second. So what was the original goal or hope of the podcast?
Do you want to take this, Mom, or do you want me to keep talking?
Go ahead. I'll add. Go ahead. I like hearing your
sure.
voice.
So it came from a place of one. I had recently moved to Columbus from Pittsburgh and was working on my mental health. So it was one of those, I had been actively working on it for about a year. Mom was a therapist, and so it was a shared interest we had. The second thing was kind of what Mom touched on a little bit, which was how do we impact people in a way that they can have accessible, free mental health services, basically. Our first 3 episodes were a quick how-to guide of crisis, how to deal with being in the moment of crisis. Our goal was, if someone would come to you and say, hey, I've just lost my housing, or, my friend just died, whatever it wanted, we wanted to kind of create those core 3. And so you can still listen to them. I think that they're actually edited into one episode now. But since then, it's kind of moved and evolved into areas where we have talked to a lot of folks, particularly inspired by like Pia Melody's strain of like therapy and stuff. But during the George Floyd protests, we had talks with therapists who are working with activists. Like, it's kind of grown to be more of this, still a free mental health resource, but I think that we've talked about some serious trauma stuff, and we've also talked about local Columbus events that are, affecting all of us. So it's kind of been, a community route.
Yeah, I would also add, just probably with the pandemic, there's such a sense of isolation, that people really stayed home a lot, worked at home a lot. And I think what we've really worked to develop is a sense of community and undoing some of the aloneness so that they could find some welcome and relationship and familiarity of getting to know us a little bit. Our episodes are really very, I think, relational. Like, we laugh, we talk about deep things, we talk about hard things, but then we're also just very real and conversational. So it would sound just like you're joining us for a cup of coffee or spending time together. And so I think having that sense of someone familiar, something that people can feel included in, welcomed in, is an important piece of it. It's an important part of the story to say that we don't have to be isolated. We don't have to be alone. This is a way to get to know some people that, we're reaching out with support and hope and light and encouragement and real authenticity, that life is hard and not just silver lining kind of stuff. And so
Yeah,
hopefully that's a big part.
Yeah, there were a couple episodes where we sat down after, a tough week that we had all had independently, and just come and been, actually, so we had been to one of your conferences, Guy, where you had, talked about some benefits of doing some podcast things one way or another. And so we talked, and we were just authentic, hey, it's been a hard week. And so there's a level of authenticity that we've also tried to keep, where it's just, we're all living life. We're not perfect. We've talked about some of our own struggles. We have this cool segment called Trail Mix, where we go through, and what I call it is basically group therapy for me and one of our co-hosts, Sarah Wakefield, who's great. And Mom basically comes out with these questions, and we kind of pull away, different perspectives on the questions, as well as, I've noticed even with me and Sarah, some questions impact us more than others. So I might just phone in one answer and then give a real honest answer for another, because it's, gotten me on a base level.
I want to go back to that, Samuel. So, but before I do, I just want to name the relationship between you two is pretty amazing. I mean, I think to be able to have a son, Julie, that you're able to communicate on this level about this stuff is really inspiring. As a father myself, I would hope that I could do that at some point with my son. But how has it been for you? And then I want to ask you, Samuel, to do that, because it's a huge deal here. We're not, it's very different, right? Not every podcast has a mother and son, and let alone talking about these topics. What's it like for you?
For me, it is really huge. It is really enormous, because my family of origin is not so connected, and I don't resonate on that same deep level. And so I've tried to lean into that more in our family now, and the next generation. I think it's also hard in a way that I can't guarantee that my kids feel the same way that I do about them. And so for all I know, Samuel's got all kinds of thoughts of, well, here are the things I wish were different. And here's what has, he'll change for the next generation or whatever. And so I really respect that. I really, as a mom, I have a huge heart for my kids. I absolutely, truly adore them. Like I feel very like a lot of joy. I've certainly felt stretched beyond my capacity at times because it's hard to parent. But the relationship really matters to me. And so I hope whenever they reflect as I go into eventually, my later years, that it'll be a good feeling of something that they feel connected and supported and loved. That's certainly been my hope. But at the same time, I also respect that I don't know how it lands for them. And so I find myself asking questions like that. And I don't know if they ever want to be that honest with me or not. And so I think that's the hard part. You know
this
what I
is what's
mean?
good
Like,
about me being the host of this podcast. Samuel,
you
what
can
do you
ask the
say?
hard question.
What do you say? Seriously, I mean, what's your take on having your mom doing this podcast with your mom? And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, so there's like two parts to it, the first part is definitely, I talk to a lot of folks who haven't had the opportunity to, have that connection either with their parents or with their kids. And so, I try to enjoy the moments. Like, we have inside jokes. We come up with little catchphrases like feed your inner plant. And so it's fun. It's, we tease mom for not knowing any sort of, reference that other people would make. And so, pop culture reference or something. And so it's kind of like a fun energy where, I learn a lot, I'm able to be with mom. The other side is it gets to a point of we've been doing it for 4 years. And so I think that there are two results of that. And I don't know if we've talked about this, but one is we have to post every week. And so when work gets busy, I feel really bad if I miss a posting. And that stress kind of adds up. But, we have a good dynamic, the two of us. And then the second thing is sometimes the project is exciting that's what we'll talk about, where we'll be together for, an extended amount of time, and we'll be talking about a lot of podcasting stuff. And so overall, I would say I'm excited to continue to community roots. I know what we would like to get it to a point is when we're like emceeing therapy events. But and that's just because, that's something we've talked about before. But yeah, I'm down to keep going. I think overall, we have been able to talk weeks on end, like week after week. We've been able to, hear each other's voices past, 18, which is hard to do. We meet up more often, and we've even been able to transition through COVID. It's kind of proven some things, like right now, mom's at her office and I'm at my work from home area. And so it's not even something that physical presence, like we've kind of even gone to a point where, we're just able to work together. And then kind of something you highlighted before is the cool dynamic we've built. Sometimes we start episodes and we don't know even the next thing that's going to come out of our mouth, but we're able to wing it. The 1-2, we have Sarah Wakefield, who's really great as well. And
is she just a friend? She's not.
Yeah, she was a guest on our podcast.
Okay.
And she's mom's friend. But it's really grown into a, dynamic of the three of us. I think she's been the host or co-host for like 2.5, 3 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I would say it's awesome. It's a great experience. I think that I'm going to look back, and we have such a treasure trove of videos and audio and stuff that I wonder how many outtakes I have.
That would be an interesting thing.
That'll just be, but
it was cool too. my youngest daughter was driving, traveling over the Labor Day holiday, and she just sent a message that she was like, I've been listening to Community Roots. And she's like, Mom, you have such a soothing voice, soothing podcast voice or something. And I thought, that is pretty neat that we have these conversations and these collections where we have each other's voices recorded, that at any
Mhm.
time you feel like you want to bridge the distance or the miles, or just kind of hear that familiar voice, even within the context of our family. I feel like that's a gift. I know I love hearing Samuel's voice. I mean, it's a gift to have each other's voices. And so that's a pretty neat little bonus, I think. But
And in terms of like, what is our family's impact on, the world, or the even like the collective footprint? If you'd Google our names, what would come up? It would be, Emma's wedding photography and Community Roots and your therapy. So I think it's a good impact, in general, like a thing. We have a couple episodes with me, mom, and dad. So that's
Mm.
pretty like impactful. We have episodes with me and mom and my youngest sister. So it's almost like a treasure trove of our history in that way,
mm,
but
Let
as
me
well
ask
as
you,
an accessible resource.
has it been challenging to open up to each other in this process, or did it just happen from the get-go? Has it evolved to a certain degree? Your ability to share your quote unquote imperfections and your mental health struggles, each of you.
I'll go first because mom can answer however she'd like. But I would say that whenever our relationship has been built on trust before this. And so we've routinely had conversations about mental health. Like mom has been a big support before this podcast. And so this is, at least in my eyes, not necessarily a growth necessarily of our relationship, rather a solidification of like what it has been.
mm. And I think for me, uh, there is some sort of chemistry that happens in our conversations that is just so. Samuel could ask me anything and I would be happy to lean in and to just give him my true heart and my honesty and my struggle. And in a way that's kind of challenging as a parent, because you don't want them to think like, oh, you're struggling so much, are you even, capable of being
Mm-hmm.
in that role or something? But instead, I feel like, I think part of the sadness of my family of origin not being closer is that there isn't that interpersonal connection and sharing, and in some ways just being known. And so for me, I'm really passionate about, I'm going to show up with all of me as a parent, as a mom, as a person. And so probably, I don't know, my four kids have different personalities, each one of them. Some of them are probably like, too much, that's enough, we don't need to keep talking. And others might be like, we could talk the night away, I mean, for hours on end. And I do my best to really support what each person needs or
Mm-hmm.
wants. I think from my standpoint, I always love being close and I love sharing and I love depth. Like, I tend to not really be very good at small talk. And that's part of the pop culture reference of me going like, I don't really know what people are talking about with various references. I'm more about the get to the heart. And not that everything has to be serious by any means. We have great memories of lighthearted fun, and my passion for football, and the rest of the family just amused by watching me watch football. But it's just, there's a richness in that, just a connection in that really matters to me. And so I do my best to not overpower with that they're like, oh gosh, here goes mom, or anything like that. I don't know if they think that. They might think that. But I do try to, like, that's probably my challenge. But as far as willingness to open up or let guard down, I feel like I'm all in. I'm like, that's what life is about to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's beautiful, and I appreciate what you said, Samuel, as well. I think for you, Julie, the modeling that is going on for your son, I think is incredible to be able to model being all in and showing up and being authentic and being willing to say, you know what, I don't know what the hell is going on, or I'm hurting in this area, or there's a challenge in this area. Because let's face it, we're all going through stuff to a certain degree. All of us, it's just part of being human. All right, look, guys, as we wind down here, how do people get in touch with you? I mean, this is incredible. I remember talking to you both a while ago, but I don't remember the connection you guys had, and it's so, and not just the connection, but your ability to hold each other's space and to create this amazing podcast is crazy. It's amazing. How do people find out about the podcast?
Yeah, so at this point, you can just Google Community Roots. Roots is spelled routes. You can also, we're on Spotify, we're on iTunes. Mom has a website up with the entire archive. You can go to jhrcounseling.com. But yeah, we have some awesome stuff. We've really grown. We like segments, so we have different artwork for a lot of our things, and we have trail mix, like I had mentioned before, which is kind of like a collection of questions. We have deep breath that comes out every other week, which is one of the hosts, normally Mom, just taking 5 minutes out of your day to kind of talk about a mental health uplift. We have Off the Beaten Path, where we have guests come. And so, it's one of those, if you just pull up our page, you'll kind of see a variety of what you might find interesting, influential art authors, therapists, or even just, regular folks that are going through the struggles that, at least I'm going through. So yeah, I don't know if Mom would add anything else, but that's how
I would
you
just
found
add
us.
like the meaning that we put in with the name of Community Roots, like Samuel said routes. I thought that was funny. So ROUTES is how we spell the name of the podcast, but that kind of represents a pathway that we are coming alongside of people in this journey, in this kind of pilgrimage called life. But then it's also a double meaning of the roots, of the depth of how do we go deeper? How do we grow? How do we feel grounded and supported and see that over time? So we really liked the double meaning of it. We just have to spell it for people so they can find
Every
it.
time. Yeah.
And then when you see the logo, we had a dear friend of Samuel's, Alexander Wells, that did the logos for us. The main logo for Community Roots are like little houses, and a little sun. And it's just this sense of community, of relationship, of connection, and all of that. And so all of our segments are super fun too, and people might identify with one or another, and they have their own logos too, but they're under that umbrella of Community Roots.
Community Roots.
Awesome. We'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Folks, I'm excited to get this out there and help you get the word out about the podcast. You folks are welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, guy. This has been great.
All right. We'll be in touch.
So great to be with you.
Thanks.